Alright, so we have created the database, we have the DAO, so the infrastructure, the below infrastructure is already set up, which is really good. So now we're going to move up to go to repository. Now, as I said before, to have a repository is optional in the sense that it's not part of this architecture for things to actually work properly, right? So repository is an optional, nonetheless useful, because it's the place where we can have the clean API, right? A way to cleanly communicate with anything else upwards, like a view model and the user interface and so forth. So we're going to create the repository, even though it's not a structure that it's needed per se, but it's a good habit. So back to our code here, let's go and create a new package. So new, and it's a repository as such, and inside there, let's create a new Kotlin class called note repository. Right, now here is Hilt where that dependency injection really shines, because this repository will have to have access to what? Yes, we'll have to have access to our DAO, because remember, our DAO is the connector between anything else at the top here with what we have at the bottom here. So the DAO, data access object, access the data from our SQLite, right? From our entities and database and so forth. So all of that is inside of our room database structure. So how do we do that? Well, we're going to say at inject. This is the beauty, because now we can just invoke we can just say at inject and say constructor. So we can inject a property in our constructor here. What property we want? I'm going to say private val, and I'm going to put a note database DAO type like this. Right? Very good. So now we'll have access to our node database DAO, which is needed, of course, to access our database and query the database and do all sort of things, right? The CRUD operations. So create, read, update, and delete. So inside here, we are going to create, right? Because remember, it's going to be the second layer to our data, right? So I'm going to invoke from here the operations. So I'm going to create a suspend, again, functions. In this case, add node. Well, to add a node, we need to pass an actual node object. And then I'm going to just say node database DAO, right? Because I have access to it there. That's the beauty. And invoke the insert method or function and pass our node. So remember, our DAO here has the actual functions, queries, so we can actually insert things or deal with the underlying database, right? Because we have here, you can see query, and we can start selecting, for instance, all nodes from the database or a certain node and so forth, right? So that is the structure. We are now connecting to our data access object, which has access to the data. Okay, so we can continue here. Oh, let's finish with our node. Again, we can just pass a node because node and node, they have the same name. That's fine. Right, I'm going to create another one. Suspend, again, fun. And say update node. I'm going to pass the node. It's going to be node database DAO again, and update and pass the node. Right? And let's say delete node. It's going to be node DAO, database DAO, delete node, pass that node that needs to be deleted. And that's fine. And we can also say suspend again, delete all nodes. Now to delete all nodes, we don't have to pass anything. Just say node. So we're gonna say node database DAO, delete all. Okay, and you can see, let's make sure that this is correct. you can see that some of the names are actually similar, right? So update note, this says update. I could have made all of them have the same names because they're different classes, right? So they are mirroring each other because it makes sense. All our repository is doing is mirroring whatever the DAO is doing. So if it says update here, I could also say update and so forth. So the names of the functions could be the same, and usually they tend to be the same. Okay. All right, and let's say what else? I'm going to suspend. Let's say get all nodes. Now, how do we get all nodes? Well, we have to be very mindful, of course, of the types. So when we get all nodes, let's see. Here says get nodes, same thing. Notice we're passing flow, right? It's going to wrapping the whole list of nodes inside of flow so that we are able to get that state and propagate the information throughout the entire application so that a widget in this case or a composable function can listen to this state, this flow of data. Okay, so types are very important here. So that means then, of course, we're going to do the same thing here. This is expecting a flow. Make sure we get the Kotlin coroutines flow as such. It's going to be the same thing. So it's list of nodes object. Let's say node database DAO get nodes, and this is when then I'm going to say dot flown on like this, and then I'm going to pass the context. So I'm just going to say dispatcher .io, and then we're going to say dot conflate like that. And at this point, we can actually get rid of suspend because that's not necessary since we are actually getting a flow. So this will take care of all of the background threads and we don't need to worry about it. Okay, so there we go. So now we have created our repository, which is now closer, one step closer to our view model. So the view model in this case doesn't have to go through and get the DAO directly, although it could, but now instead it's going to go through repository to get the data. And then of course, inside here, we can use live data. We can use flow. In this case, that's what we're going to be using, but we can use any other data structure that allows us to have that state. That's very important, especially for our composables up here. All right, so we're making good progress. Let's continue in the next video.